you've known Tim Walz for a long time. You spoke glowingly about him. I remember in 2006 when he was running for Congress, and a lot of people liked him, but didn't think he could necessarily win. But what I love about that is that he just connected with people in his district. You know him well. What do you hope the American public sees about who he is as a human being?
Well, he's the all-American man. I mean, he's just fabulous. And that year, we even had some contention within the Democrats about the priority of that race. My daughter, Christine, was doing boot camps. She loves to train candidates and the rest. And he was one of her boot campers. But nonetheless, a very difficult Republican seat. But he really did connect. Connect as a long-term, long-serving veteran now, and then as a person who grew up on the farm and worked in agriculture, could speak to rural America. Just a lovely family man. His wife, Gwen, they were a team, really, coming to Congress. And, of course, their children were little then, now they're bigger. But he was part of our big victory that year to take back the House for the Democrats, for the American people, for the children, and he was part of our victory to pass the Affordable Care Act.
Such a big part of your legacy and certainly his. We knew the Republicans would go after him because that's what they do. And they've been going after him and calling him dangerously liberal, a San Francisco liberal. Nothing wrong with that, but I don't think he is one. They've been calling him Tampon Tim, which is a dig at his support for a state law that required public schools to have menstrual products, which, by the way, is a great thing. And now they're trying to attack, I'm going to say, Swift Boat, his military record. He served for 24 years in the National Guard. He was the highest enlisted member of Congress, had been the highest ranking enlisted member of Congress when he was in Congress, and did an enormous amount on the Veterans Affairs Committee. What do you say to these efforts to attack his military record?
Well, first of all, it's a sign of the bankruptcy of their ideas. They don't have anything to say, so they make up things. So first of all, he was in the National Guard 20 years. He thought he'd stay 20 years, but then 9/11 happened, so he signed up for 4 more years. He retired from that to run for Congress months before his unit was assigned to being deployed. So it was after he left. So they're just trying to confuse things. But he came to Congress and was respected by our colleagues, elected to be the top Democrat on the Veterans Affairs Committee, where he, and working with Chet Edwards on the Appropriations Committee and he on the Authorizing Committee, made historic advances for veterans, meeting their needs, more than had been done since the GI Bill during World War II.
Do you think, and I was referencing, and I worked on John Kerry's campaign, and you worked hard on the outside of John Kerry's campaign, and he was swift-voted in that period of time. I'm just curious, even though these are baloney charges, absurd on a man who served in the National Guard, should they be punching back at this? Should they call it out?
They should just dismiss it, because if people lie, as they are lying, and you hear the lie enough times, it sort of becomes some kind of accepted in their in their group. And so you have to say, no, that didn't happen. Like they're criticizing him about Minneapolis, and the president praised him, and we have it on tape. He praised him how it went. So that is, the reality has to be driven home. I'm not one to let their misrepresentations persist. And by the way, he signed up for he was there for 20 years. Then when 9/11 happened, he signed up for 2 more terms of office. So, and then he left, and then his unit was deployed. So the timing is very important to note, because he really was only going for 20 years, but because of 9/11 persisted. So he has been a consistent, patriotic, courageous American.
I've seen up close the relationship you have with President Biden, and he respects you, he loves you. That's what I saw when I was working for him. And you've known each other for so long. And David Remnick asked you if you thought your relationship would survive after President Biden dropped out, and you said, "I hope so, I pray so, I cry so." And you said you lose sleep over it. And I just was wondering how this has impacted you personally the last couple of weeks.
Well, it's been again, his legacy as a preeminent president, and it's hard to, he's right there among the top few, a very consequential president. I wanted the decision to be a better campaign so that we could win. I did not think we were on a path to victory. So that was really more the thing. He made his decision that would be accomplished by him stepping aside.
You said, to your point, I've never been that impressed with his political operation.
No.
What was it about the operation? I mean, you have a gut instinct about this. You've been a part of many winning cycles. What was it about that, and was it more that than about him as a candidate?
Oh, yeah, it was about that. I praise them. He was elected president of the United States, and that was a very important election for our country, a very important election. So I praise him and them for that.
The Harris-Walz campaign is only a couple weeks old. Have you been more impressed with that political operation?
They've done, I think, see about Kamala.
It's a lot of the same people, but
yeah, and more. You know, some more in there, but the operation was there. So, but the thing is that she is personally very faith-filled, and that translates into her civic responsibilities and the rest in a very faith-filled way. That's so personally, I see that. Officially, she's strong about the issues. You see one of them, the woman's right to choose, but there's so many others. She's strong in that regard officially, and politically, she's very astute, and people just don't realize that. She won against the incumbent for a district attorney. She won in a very competitive race for Attorney General, but she figured it out. She figured out she was behind, and then she won. And then she won for Senate. That was easier. And then as soon as this, shall we say, I don't want to say opportunity because, well, this opportunity came along, she just rolled and did it gracefully, respectfully, and in every way, and saw her political astuteness. Personally, officially, politically, she's ready.
Given your long friendship with President Biden and how much you have long loved each other, worked together so many times, I know you haven't talked, unless you tell me you have talked,
no,
since he decided not to run. Is there a way back with your friendship?
Let me just say, in our family, we have 3 generations of love for Joe Biden. My husband and I, of course, we've known him for a very long time, respect him, love him, and he and Jill are so remarkable, and their family. Our kids have always loved him. I have pictures with him from our children growing up, and now our grandchildren growing up. So we have 3 generations of love for him, and you know, I hope that would sustain as we go forward. But the most important thing we have to do is to win the election, to sustain his legacy, and to have the legacy be to do even more in the presidency and the vice presidency of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Okay.
Onward to victory. One good day in front of another. Organize, own the ground with mobilization, message with boldness and progressiveness, but non-menacing. The money to get the job done, it's all in place. One good day in front of another. No wasted time, no underutilized resources, and no regrets the day after the election that we could have done more.
Before you were Nancy Pelosi, you were Nancy D'Alessandro. Your father had a tremendous legacy as the mayor of Baltimore, a longtime member of Congress. He did a lot of things, including working on low-income rental housing. I just want to ask you, as you have kind of risen to be one of the most powerful women, if not the most powerful woman right now in politics, how has he and his career and his life and legacy impacted you?
Well, in terms of my father, he then went on to serve in the Kennedy administration and the Johnson administration. But he started out, as a poor boy. We grew up in Little Italy in Baltimore. Even when he became mayor, people thought we would move, but that wasn't ever going to happen because it's true to his roots and the rest. But he was quite remarkable. He was a great orator. He could turn a room around of people who were booing into people cheering and laughing. He became a real champion for the establishment of a state of Israel in what was Palestine then, and also criticized the Roosevelt administration for not doing more to help the Jewish people in Europe, worshipped at the shrine of Franklin Roosevelt, was one of the early Italian Americans to serve in Congress.
Very gutsy. I think maybe that's part of the legacy that's been passed on in Fearless.
But I don't want to knock my mother, because she was the organizer. Mm-hmm. He was the orator and the policymaker, and she was all of those things, but the organizer.
No, I love that. Important to include. You also talk about your Catholic faith. I wanted to ask you about this because I think you've had some moments that I imagine have been difficult, as President Biden has, as it relates to faith. Because in 2022, the head of the San Francisco Archdiocese said you should be prohibited from receiving communion in any San Francisco diocese because of your support of abortion rights. And there are a lot of, I think, up-and-coming politicians who have a similar struggle, right? They want to be true to their faith. They want to be true to what they believe politically. What do you tell them, and how have you dealt with that personally?
Well, in being true to our faith, we want people to be true to their faith. And that's the way it is. I mean, I came from an Italian Catholic family who were not exactly where I was on a woman's right to choose, even though I was imbued growing up with the fact that we all have a free will and have a responsibility to live up to our responsibilities. And so I felt very comfortable about having public policy that enabled people to live up to their responsibilities. Our Archbishop, he's the head of every parade against women's rights and women's right to choose and LGBTQ. I don't have very much in common with him when it comes to the what I call the cultural issues. I'm very happy, though, that when I go to church in Washington, D.C., the cardinal here had a letter read in every parish in his diocese that communion was not a political weapon and no one would be turned away from the altar for that.
You also speak glowingly, I kind of love this part of the book, about the Bush family, specifically George H.W. Bush. Your family goes way back.
Yeah.
But you even have some nice things to say about his son, George W. Bush, which might surprise people who read the book, because you were a strong opponent of the Iraq War. That is part of his legacy. But talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the Bush family and how that tells you about that period of time in politics.
You know, when you're a new member of Congress, sometimes you don't really know how unpowerful you are. So I went in there, started fighting against our policy on China right after Tiananmen Square. I came in '87, that happened in '89. So I had a disagreement with President George Herbert Walker Bush on that, but we kind of, it was a difference of opinion. It wasn't an animosity. It was just it was policy. It wasn't personal. So we were friends. He was such a lovely man. He was really, as I said, when President George W. Bush was being sworn in, as is the custom, go to the Capitol as a leader to escort him go to the White House to escort him to the Capitol. And he said, my father and mother will be here. And I said, well, I can't wait to see him. He's a sweetheart. He said, why does everybody say that about him and not about me? I said, well, okay, I won't go there. But he was. And so I tell a story when we're at one of the Christmas events, congressional Christmas events at the White House, and President Senior Bush comes over to me, asks about family, this or that, and the rest. And then he says, I'm a speaker, give my kid a break.
Which is such a great story. I mean, every parent can relate to that, I think.
So. As a parent, I related to it myself, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely. You have often been, you write about this thematically in the book a lot, the only woman in the room, sometimes the first woman who's ever been in a room. There's been a lot of progress made, and you talk about this too, in terms of more women in elected office, a much more diverse caucus.
Yeah.
But what do you tell people about what progress still needs to be made?
Well, I'm encouraged by the progress that's made. When I came to Congress, there were 23 women in the House out of 435 people, 11 Republicans, 12 Democrats. We have 94 now because we made a decision that we would recruit, that we would fund, that we would encourage women. And some self-recruited, had the confidence to do that. And with the belief that nothing is more wholesome to a political and governmental process than the increased participation of women, and in fact, diversity writ large, not just women. So our caucus is now 70% women, people of color, LGBTQ, and that it isn't that women are better than men. It's just you have to have the mix at the table, or otherwise you're missing something very important. So, of course, we would like to see a woman president of the United States, and that seems to be, no, I think is in our grasp. I do think it is what we will celebrate in November.